Morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. And just to do a few bits of housekeeping before Tom starts, just to explain the format of the webinar this morning, there's going to be three of us talking, Tom first, James, and then myself, for about 10 minutes each. And then we will have time for Q&A. If you have any questions, we've had some on email. I've had some on email already. We'll answer those. But if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section. If you've got any queries, please put them in the chat. And without further ado, I'm going to let Tom start the conversation.
Thank you, Joanna. Good morning, everybody. We're in an overcast morning in London, cool and slightly breezy, but we're ready to go. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the latest immigration views on coming to the UK and also the latest on employment. The various visas that can get you into the UK are listed on the slide in front of you. To say that these slides will be sent to you after the event. I have done about 18 slides. I won't be spending much time on most of them. I will be spending time on a few of them. So don't worry about the ones that I quickly go through. They will be coming through to you after the event. So the three main types of visa that exist are the sole representative visa, the tier 1, which is for self-employed, the tier 2 for employed people. The major changes to the visa system, at the moment there's an immigration bill going through Parliament, which is primarily to deal with EU nationals arriving in the UK from the 1st of January 2021. They are going to need a work visa. Before the 1st of January, very importantly, we have an increase in government charges for visas. They come into effect in October. The health charge will increase from £400 per year per person to £624 per year per person. So if you are thinking about getting a work visa anytime in the next 6 months, there is a good financial reason for getting it before October. Now, there are some significant changes that are going to come in on the 1st of January with the new Immigration Act in relation to employed workers. These are good changes because they are making more flexible the rules relating to tier 2 general. Now, for tier 2 general, a company has to have a sponsor license first of all, and that can take 3 or 4 months to get, starting from the time of application, getting the application ready to the time of getting the license through. And it's only after the license is obtained that visas can be applied for. The license is obtained in the name of the UK company. Now, there are two types of visa under tier 2. One is an intercompany transfer visa, which does not allow for settlement, and the other is the general visa, which does allow for settlement. Now, the good thing is that the rules for obtaining the general visa are being loosened from the 1st of January. So instead of the skills level being graduate and above, it is being reduced to A-level standard. The minimum salary level, instead of being 30,000 per annum, is going to reduce to 25,600 per annum. The advertising requirement, which currently exists and which many people in our experience get wrong, is going to be removed in its entirety. And finally, the cap that exists on the number of tier 2 general visas is going to also be abolished. So that is good news for Tier 2. As far as the innovator and startup visas are concerned, these are visas that came in to replace the Tier 1 entrepreneur visa a year ago. They haven't been very successful so far. I think it is fair to say that they are still finding their feet. Well, the good news there is that 2 government bodies are going to become endorsers for these visas. And I do know that one of those government bodies is going to be Department of International Trade. And I do also know that they are going to be running a pilot to begin with in relation to being a new endorser. So in the first few months, there won't be a perceptible increase in the number of these types of visas that are being granted, because there is a cap on the number of endorsements that can be made for business plans. But eventually, I feel that these 2 visas are going to start to become more popular, because there is going to be the ability to provide endorsements for the business plans more than there is at the moment. The Global Talent Visa, Tier 1, is an excellent visa, in my opinion, and is going to become even more popular when the EU nationals have to come in with a work visa if they do not want to be in the employed category. So for self-employed people who have exceptional talent, this visa will be the route that a lot of people will try. Again, an endorsement is required, but it's been in existence now for 3 or 4 years and has proven very popular. But there has been a cap on the number of endorsements and visas that can be obtained. We would expect it, as I say, to be a main route for self-employed people to try and come in to the UK from the 1st of January. The sole representative visa has also been an increasingly popular route with the abolition of the Tier 1 entrepreneur visa. And the rules have been tightened up to prevent abuse, as it is felt that a number of entrepreneurs, people who own more than 50% of a business, have tried to get round that rule, for example, by using dependents to come in and then as the main applicant, and then to come in as the dependent of the spouse. And finally, to say the good news that the post-study 2 years visa for students is starting in September 2020. So the post-study visa will only apply after students have graduated from starting in September 2020. But again, that is good news. Now, the effects of Brexit on EU nationals. The UK left the EU on the 31st of January 2020, and we're currently in the transition phase lasting until the 31st of December 2020, and nothing has changed in the meantime. We know negotiations are ongoing for a new trade deal to be in place. The transition phase could be extended, but it isn't likely. And as I said, from the 1st of January 2021, EU nationals arriving to live and work in the UK will need a work visa. EU nationals who arrive in the UK up to the 31st of December have the right to live and work in the UK visa-free, but they must apply for settled and pre-settled status. And note that the deadline for applying is the 30th of June, 2021. It's a free registration process, and it's very simple, and over 3 million EU nationals have already applied for it. And note that the most common way to employ an EU national after the 31st of December 2020 will be via the sponsor license route. Now, I'm just going to quickly go through these other slides. Note that the red highlight are changes to the existing visa rules. And I'm going to just say a few words about employment. So in relation to employment, there are also some new rules, not many, but the main new rule is that there are new information requirements for new employees to be given from the date they start. At the moment, there is a requirement to provide a new employee, with particulars of employment within 8 weeks of them starting, and that is now changing, so that new employees must be given this information and more from the date they start. The remaining items on that list are all already in existence. So, for example, you need 2 rights to get statutory protection against termination. You're entitled to 28 days holiday, including 8 public holidays that we have in the UK. There is an employer NI national insurance tax cost of 13.8%, and when you add the 4% that an employer must pay towards pension contribution, that totals about 18% on top of the salary that you have to pay an employee. Opting out from the Working Time Directive, the EU has a requirement across the 27 other countries of the EU that no employee can be asked to work more than 48 hours a week. The UK has an opt-out from that. And finally, if you want to prevent a claim being brought by a terminated employee, then you have to enter into a settlement agreement with prescribed language. In the post-lockdown world of employment, note that there is a government furlough scheme, at the end of which an employer either has to make somebody redundant by giving them notice and going through a consultation process. A lot of our employees in the UK are working from home at the moment, and we are now coming to the situation from the 1st of August that the government has said everybody should be able to go back to work in the office. If you do work in the office, you have to do a risk assessment for being able to allow people back into the office. And finally, there is the aspect of commuting, which is perceived as possibly the most virus-affected part of the workday, getting to and from the office. So that's all I wanted to say on the visas and employment. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, James Blakemore, who's going to talk to you.
Thanks, thanks, Tom. Okay, hi everyone. Nice to meet you. Thanks, Tom, for that presentation. Mine is regarding sales and marketing in the UK. Just a bit of background about Jambi and who we are. We're a company that's been around for about 15 years, working with over 1,000 international companies, helping them generate sales in the UK, helping them find customers and opportunities. 40% of our clients are sort of what we call pre-investment, so are looking to come to the UK, set up an office and need some support there. But the majority of our clients do have an office in the UK, and we're supporting their country manager or major representative to help them find new customers. We provide a range of services all around lead generation, setting up of meetings, opportunities, undertaking that work through telemarketing, email marketing, and LinkedIn. Last bit of the presentation on us. An award-winning company winning the Queen's Award, and we work with a number of international organisations. One of the logos on there is the Department for International Trade, and I would highly recommend any of the companies on today's webinar, if you aren't already, to get in contact with DIT. They're a fantastic resource to be able to understand and evaluate what opportunities there might be in the UK. So as I said, do get in touch with your local consulate or embassy who'll be able to help you. Presentation title is Knowledge is King, Data is Queen, and Delivery Rules. What do we mean by that? Knowledge is obviously extremely important, especially when looking at the UK market. One of the common mistakes that we find with companies when we first speak to them is they haven't quite done the homework as such in terms of planning and understand what are the subtle differences between your own market and the UK market. there may be very much similarities, but there will always be something that might change where you've been successful in your own market to what is likely to succeed here in the UK. And that might be a political thing, and that might be more of a social thing in terms of how people buy and where the opportunities might be. So really getting to understand that can be vital. Price point is extremely important. Obviously, making sure that you're at the right level. In terms of one of the common mistakes that companies might make is take their price list, put that into Google and translate from euros into pounds, whereas actually understanding what your local competitors are charging will enable you to make sure you're at the right point. In some cases, from a sales point of view, you can put people off by being too cheap. On another front, you might actually be missing out on revenue where you could actually increase prices in the UK. So it's really about trying to find the right price point to be effective here. We do a lot of work with clients on profiling of their existing clients in their own market. What we do with that and what they can do is to understand each of their clients, where they gain them from, how they gain them, but also what sort of profile they are in terms of size of company. Are they family owned? Are they stock market listed? These type of things, so that when they come to profile UK companies, they can find similar organizations that fit that sort of profile, and then generate a list of leads that is likely to succeed here. Because it's obvious from a risk point of view, if you're already working with companies of a certain type of organization, if they're the similar ones in the UK, then that's where we would suggest making your first sort of activity. And also understanding local news agenda. So we've seen it time and time again where companies have really succeeded in the UK because of timing. So understanding what the government are talking about. So as an example, in the past couple of days, the UK government have been talking about infrastructure a lot, talking about building their way out of any sort of financial problems. So that does mean that the government, by all accounts, are going to be, as an example, are spending £1 billion on upgrading schools over the next 3 years. So understanding that news agenda, what the government are really focusing on in terms of technology and healthcare and that type of thing, that's obviously very much related to the sector you're looking at, can be a great way of using those opportunities to the best of your ability. Next area is around data. Obviously, within any lead generation sales project, you're looking to achieve success. The best way to achieve that success, in my opinion, is through data. If you have the right data, the project will likely succeed. If you are targeting the wrong types of organizations with the wrong message, then it's pretty much doomed to fail. So spending that time to really understand who your audience are and what the right message to that audience is really valuable. Joanna later is going to talk specifically around PR, and that's a really invaluable tool to really get the right message out that's validated, that's published going forward. But yeah, PR is a great way of getting messages out to the right data. Delivery rules. What this slide shows, hopefully, is that one thing won't do it for you. You have to have a combined effort of activity within sales and marketing to get traction. Hopefully, it demonstrates the cogs working together, being successful. If, as an example, if you just did telemarketing on its own, you're like trying to speak to somebody on the phone. If you ask someone, are you likely to get through to the switchboard if they've never heard of your organization? Probably not. But actually, if you'd spent some time a couple of weeks earlier sending some information via LinkedIn, putting an email campaign together, sending quite interesting content to them, and they've heard of you and it resonates with them, when you get through to the switchboard, they're then much more likely to accept the call. So those three things working hand in hand are key to going forward. One of the slides on there still talks about trade shows, and obviously in the current situation, that's more difficult than ever. But I do think there's been a lot of innovation in that space in a very short period of time. So as an example, we're looking to do an event at London Tech Week in conjunction with Rochester and DIT. That would be online and virtual, whereas before it would have been a physical event. So there's still opportunities for you to engage and network with people via trade shows, conferences, especially as those are moving for the current time anyway, online. But those are the 5 or 6 key areas we feel around being successful from a selling point of view. In terms of next steps, once you've got the right audience, you've got the right data, what do you do with that? So channel selection is really important. So for your own particular product or service, understanding the best way to proceed with that. In our experience, most cases that is to set up a UK company, to have a UK presence, and someone focused solely on promoting your business. One of the challenges sometimes of a distributor or agent model is that you don't know where you are on the priority list. They may have another 10 companies that they're working with, and you only really get mentioned when someone specifically asks for what you're offering. So having control by having your own office and support is quite important. Network is something we would obviously always talk about. A bit more challenging with the current situation in terms of physical networking, but there are so many online opportunities even in the short term, and then obviously hopefully as things return to normality, then there's obviously the normal traditional networking events that can go on. Some little things that can really make a difference. So we always talk to companies about having a UK address, UK telephone number, showing that the market that you're serious about the UK, because obviously if you're up against a UK competitor, you have to have something, a really innovative product. If you're not willing to or able to show a UK presence, people from a trust sales point of view like to know that if there was a problem, they could get in a car and speak to someone about that problem if it was needed. So by a little thing, but just having a UK phone number and UK address can help build that confidence with people as they search with you. On another area of recruitment, if you do decide to set up in the UK, one of the best tips I can offer is around making sure that first recruit is obviously 100% of your UK business is the right person. And in most cases, where we've seen most success, it's someone who comes from an industry background, who already has a contact network that they can draw on, so they can make direct mobile calls to their network, introduce the company, and open doors. So one of the best examples of that was an Irish client of ours who actually recruited 2 of his main competitors' salespeople, and that sped up his expansion to the UK. He was able to take quite a high percentage of the marketplace within a really short period of time because of that recruitment decision. Just wanted to give a bit of an update in the current situation in the UK. Obviously, the market has changed a great deal over the past 12 weeks or so. What we've seen is very much the UK is still open for business, and businesses are really looking to still engage and are wanting business to be done. LinkedIn has been a great tool to do that. Quite a large number of the UK sort of working population are currently furloughed. We're seeing that start to change as more and more people are coming back to work, which is promising. But LinkedIn has always been obviously a great tool to connect with people, but even more so now, we're finding response rates have gone up. So really do utilize LinkedIn. It's quite a cost-effective way of doing that. We would recommend for those companies serious about the UK to subscribe to some of the sort of paid-for services within LinkedIn to enable you to both build data, but also to have direct messages with contacts and to set up your own network. It's a way of networking online as such. We've also seen email open rates increase considerably over the past 12 weeks. So people having a bit more time, not necessarily traveling so much and not necessarily being in the office. They seem to be opening more emails. So those messages are getting out to people, which is promising. Telemarketing is a bit more of a mixed message currently. So what we found is that in certain ways it's improved our ability to contact key decision makers. The reason for that is that when we've spoken to offices, they've given out direct contact numbers and mobile numbers, which they might not always do. So we're able to have very direct conversations with people quickly. On the downside of telemarketing is the furlough situation, where obviously that has meant that some of the decision makers aren't actually currently working full time. So that sort of counteract, but it's around a normal level we would expect because of those two things. We've seen technology and innovation in certain sectors just increase. There's some talks of technology usage going up. Would have been 2 or 3 years took in 2 or 3 weeks. As an example, schools have embraced technology like they've never before, utilizing Microsoft Teams, utilizing specialist education software. So I think good times for people to look, especially in a technology focus, as companies are looking to to improve productivity and also looking to improve how they do business. We've also found companies and individuals willing to accept meetings, which is great. I think that sort of knowledge that they might need to invest in new things to be successful going forward has been that. It's obviously very much by sector approach. Different markets have different things. As an example, we work with a video-based technology company which reduces the amount of visits a company needs to make to people on site, which obviously is in high demand at the moment with regards to cutting costs, but also from a safety point of view. Lastly, some of our clients, to give some examples, obviously are happy to answer questions at the end of all the presentations, specifically around sales and marketing. I'd like to pass on to my colleague Joanna now as the host.
Hi everybody. So just to explain a little bit about sort of us and what we're going to talk about, and why we come on last in a way, because we link very much with what Tom and James have already been talking about in terms of making sure you've got a good presence here in the UK, that you can get known and seen and heard and talked about. So we really regard sort of the job that we do alongside Tom and James as being very much an essential part of doing business in the UK. Hang on a second, sorry. At the top, what's it say? Oh, so Tom's saying, James, you need to end share screen. But I thought I was sharing mine, so. Anyway, can you see that, Tom and James, if you let me know?
I can see your screen, yeah.
Yeah, okay, fine. Sorry, I don't know what Tom was saying. That's fine. So we work with a lot of companies. We specialise just in market entry, and it's all about managing and your company and your brand's reputation, because if you don't, somebody else will, I guess. We work across a very wide spread of client sectors, from tech to food and drink, lifestyle services, associations and organisations. And our brands come from all over the world. So examples of who we're working for at the moment: a chocolate brand, an IP platform, a smart cane for the visually impaired, chatbot lead generation company, ed tech educational companies. So the type of PR that we're talking about today is very broad, B2B, B2C, and corporate and crisis work. Our focus is all on making a business successful, basically, in whichever way that means. So what you're really trying to think about as you come into the UK is where you sit, and James referred to this a bit, where you sit in terms of people knowing about you before you come. And really, in many ways, we would say you sit down the bottom at the not known section. And our job, along with others, is to move you up to become a trusted brand. And to do that, the heart and the head there symbolise sort of the two key components of getting known and getting understood as a brand. And that's really to do with making sure that you have the rational appeal. Again, as James said, why is your brand or product service, why is it good for the UK? Who are your customers? But also something that very much plays into the PR and marketing side, which is the emotional side of it. So, appealing to people in a way that makes them want to buy your brand and do business with you. There's a good quote from MasterCard, which talks about, we have an identity and a set of values that travel globally, and then we figure out how to adapt that locally. So you need to really understand who you are, if your values can travel, and then you need to build trust. So this is often what we start by doing in the UK, which is helping people build trust. We've done some research. This is pre-COVID research. We've actually just completed some research now, but this is pre-COVID research, which talks about whether brands, companies from certain countries have more of a global vision for their brand or their company from the outset. So you'll see there, for example, at one end, you've got Turkey with a very high score in terms of what they see, and then Australia maybe at the other end of the spectrum on this set of countries. But that really is sort of them articulating whether or not they need to go global in order to get their brand seen and heard about, and to be successful. It doesn't necessarily correlate with quite how well people necessarily prepare for going global, but it's interesting to see the differences between certain countries. Another thing that we always ask people about is to rank what they see the main challenges being entering the UK. And in the top 3 are always competition against brands with a stronger local presence there on the right, understanding the business culture way of doing things on the left. And the third one varies, to be honest, between being the amount of time it takes to win customers, lack of contacts, and the amount of competition in the UK and things like that. So I think what that said pre-COVID, and I don't think there would be masses of difference now, is that actually it's a competitive market. The reason why it's a good market is because there are lots of interesting brands and companies doing business here, but that also can make it much more competitive for anybody coming into the market. So I think it goes back, obviously starts with what Tom is saying about make sure you're prepared in terms of visas and everything else, but it also, what James was saying, make sure you've done your research and thought about it and understand what the competition is going to be like. And then final piece on just the research that we've done is what people think is necessary to do before they launch into the UK. And again, sort of seek local professional advice comes up always in the top 3, as does something that James and Tom have talked about, which is employing local talent. Also appearing really quite frequently is engaging with journalists, conducting research, attending shows, which is obviously slightly more challenging, as we've talked about, and some of the other things there in terms of competitor analysis, which we would agree is really important. So the basics of going global for brands are the same as whether you're global or local anyway. You've got to make sure that you're relevant to the market that you're targeting. You've got to make sure that you're understood, and you've got to make sure that you're consistent in delivering those messages so you don't dip in and dip out. I think one trend that was seen before COVID is that consumers now around the world are trusting local brands over global brands, and that's been gradually shifting up over the last few years. And I think that's something that actually is going to stay for a bit. I think more and more companies are going to, more and more consumers or customers are going to think it's important to do business locally. But that doesn't mean to say that you as an international brand can't compete with that, because of course you can. You just have to be here and be behaving as a local brand. So the basics are pretty much the same, but that doesn't mean it's easy, which is always good to remember. And the other thing that I really do really like and think you should all bear in mind is don't confuse the internet or social media with going global. There's a lot of companies now who think, well, we're on the internet, we're on social media, anyone around the world can find us or hear us, so therefore we must be global beforehand. And it takes a lot more effort and thought before you actually really do become a truly international brand or make your mark in a new market. So in terms of the 3 things that we always say you should think about, and these are things that you can do and start doing before you come over or do your first visit or even start looking at the UK. The first is the messaging that I briefly mentioned earlier. This is really important for you to work out why your brand or your company or your service, your product is relevant for the UK market, and why now. I think we all feel around the world things have changed in our home territory. So it is really important to understand why your service is needed, why you are going to be appropriate for the UK market. And then to look at your key messages, your underlying messages, how do they work? What is it most important? Is it important to look at certain sectors, certain consumer types? And then you look at your proof points, which is more the facts and the figures that back up everything else you've said. But start with the why you're here. The second thing that we really recommend you look at, and again, it touches a bit on what James was saying, is about stakeholders. So know who are the people who are going to be important to the success of your business in the UK. Spend some time working this out. I mean, this is just a visual representation for our clients. This runs to quite a lot of pages and information, but really try and drill into each of those sections and work out exactly who is important. James mentioned, for example, on the government side, the Department for International Trade and how useful they can be, but industry associations, trade associations can be hugely influential in certain sectors. You need to know who the key opinion formers are so that you can understand who the most important people are in terms of swaying opinion. And the last thing you need to look at is where you can deliver that content. This is a slide. There are loads of these around on the internet, so if you prefer a different view of it, do take a look. But this is called paid, owned, earned, shared media. And these are all the different things. I mean, there will be many more by now as well, but these are all the different types of things that you could think about in terms of delivering your content, delivering your messages to the people who need to hear about it. So it ranges from everything from, your own website, the things that you own, your webinars, your podcasts, your videos, the emails that James mentioned, to more the earned and the shared, so the PR, the media attention you can get, and the influencer engagement you do. And then, of course, paid. There are some great bargains around in terms of paid media advertising at the moment. And they all have, as you can see, some sort of crossover. But it's worth you doing an audit of this so that you know which of these you're going to really push to make a big impression when you get into the UK. In terms of, like James did, things have changed. And so very briefly, just to give you a couple of examples of how things have changed in the UK, we're seeing obviously a lot of our clients changing the content they're delivering, the messages they're delivering. And I think that will be a watching brief over the next few months. Everybody's going to be taking a more detailed look at what they should be saying, depending on what's going on in the world. But a couple of examples from big companies here in the UK. This first from Standard Life Aberdeen, who quite early on in lockdown decided to come out and said they've decided not to go to Davos next year because the chief exec thought that would be insensitive to sort of the realities of life. So they talk very much more now about localism and how they want to put their attention into supporting local communities, local action, local support. And the second one of those is Marks and Spencer's, one of our big retailers. This again was back in April, the very end of April. And they're calling, they've now devised a program which they're calling Never the Same Again. So really thinking about, everything has changed, the world has changed, retail has of course changed hugely. We won't return to what we were pre-COVID. So how does that affect your brand, and thinking about how the market has changed for you, perhaps in the last few months in the UK. So what does that mean for international brands? I think one of the things we'd always say is to be successful in the UK, an international brand needs to be adaptable to the UK market, to what's happening here. But that's, I'd say, even more true at the moment. You really need to make sure that you've thought about, how you can adapt your brand messaging, your company for what's happening in the UK at the moment. So that's all from me. I think now we're going to take any questions. Okay, so if I just ask a couple of questions. Tom, actually, I saw some of this go up in the chat, but the hospitality industry, do you want to talk particularly about that? Because that's one that's been really badly affected.
Yes, thanks, Joanna. So the hospitality sector mainly consists of unskilled workers, and the visa regime in the UK is for highly skilled workers. Now, one of the big changes coming in on the 1st of January through the new immigration bill is for that high skill level to be reduced from graduate to A-level standard. so that jobs that can be applied for with the UK visa regime will be the A-level standard. So the good news is that more jobs will be available. However, in the hospitality industry, so many jobs are in the low skill category, and there is currently nothing planned for that area. The only way that people can come in to do those kinds of jobs are going to be through the post-study worker regime, but that isn't, the new visa doesn't come in until the end of doing your graduate level work, which only starts in September 2020. Therefore, yeah, it's a gap. Low skill visas are a problem, except in the agricultural industry, and I would imagine the government is going to have to look at it as and when demand is created going forward.
Okay, right. James, for you, let me just check, hang on, I had one up here earlier. Sort of in terms of the UK market, are companies, I know you did touch on it a bit, but telemarketing, because you hear different views as to whether people are open to this or not.
Yeah, I mean, I still think it sort of has its place in the overall marketing landscape. Obviously, there's lots of rules and regulations now. Everything that we do, as an example, is fully GDPR compliant. I think it's a great vehicle where you have a very clear understanding of who your market audience is, and you want to have direct feedback from them. So having a conversation with someone who is a decision maker is a great way, obviously, to get feedback on your product or service. But also it's a great way to present how you want to be presented to them. I think it's also backed up, as I mentioned earlier, with things like PR and articles where you can send that in advance, and it helps. All those sort of things help improve the likelihood that you will have that conversation. But yeah, it still very much has its place. And there's, as I said, with COVID-19, it's been more likely that we get direct contact numbers to those decision makers. So it very much still has its place even in the current situation.
Okay. And maybe I'll just sort of answer one that's come through to us. Just a reminder, everybody, if you've got any questions, if you want to put them in the Q&A, and we'll answer them. Obviously, you can email us all afterwards as well, but if you want anything that you want to share with anybody else. We had one question before, which was about having kept sort of quiet during lockdown and feeling the need to re-engage with customers, and how do you make the switch? I mean, I guess, again, you know, I mentioned we've just done some research. One of the things that we found out is that people felt that, generally speaking, their companies had been very good at communicating during lockdown. So in an ideal world, you wouldn't have stopped completely, because people always notice that if you stop, it is more challenging to get back in on that conversation, because the conversation's moved on. But obviously you can do it, and we do it all the time with companies who are starting. The thing is to a little bit, you know, look at what we talked about before, you know, in terms of what's right for your marketplace. But do make sure that you know, you're working out the right messages and the right people to reach, and then the right methodology to reach them becomes a little bit more obvious at that point, whether that's, as James was saying, whether it's emails or it's LinkedIn or it's other social or it's through media. But I wouldn't go, if you've done nothing, I wouldn't go from nothing to 100%. That's confusing. But make sure at all time that you're relevant and your content is meaningful for the audience, and then start engaging on that point. James and Tom, I don't know if there's anything that you would like to pick up on questions that you've had recently that you wanted to answer that maybe, you know, haven't come up here, but any points that you get asked a lot. Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
I think one area would be around the sort of different sectors that are currently very much seeing opportunities in the UK. So, as I mentioned briefly in the presentation, technology is one that companies seem more than ever willing to engage with and understand where it could help their business. I think what COVID and what lockdown has done is proven to companies that technology can be a great way of not only communicating but also doing business, and obviously working with the staff and so forth. So all sorts of different areas of tech has seen opportunities grow. So that's something that could be an opportunity for any tech company coming into the UK, especially with anything that's innovative.
Yeah, I agree with that. We've seen in the last few months, we've seen more tech companies come into the UK. You talked about level playing field. I think that's been really clear that for a lot of tech companies working with a couple from Turkey, for example, they haven't had to enter the market, they haven't had to be here, although they're very keen to get here. But they can carry on the communications and carry on talking to people whilst they're abroad, and it's not made much difference because they can all do it via Zoom or whatever else. So yeah, Tom, from your perspective, is there anything particularly?
Yes, well, the issue of getting a visa in the lockdown scenario. So if somebody wants to apply for a visa, they normally have to apply from their home country. And obviously with the lockdown situation and the fact that certain countries have come out of it and other countries are going into it or are still in it, this is making it really difficult for people to work out when it is that they want to come over to the UK, because you can come into the UK, but at the moment there is this self-quarantine rule of 14 days. So if you although it isn't being regulated by anybody, so the situation is that you can come in from anywhere in the world to the UK. But you have to self-quarantine for 14 days. There are air bridges that are going to be created, and that announcement is expected on Wednesday, I think, from the EU. And it mainly is going to consist of people from Western Europe and also New Zealand and some Southeast Asia countries, the US off limits, and South America off limits, Africa off limits. But essentially, if you want to get a visa, you've got to apply to your local visa center. And we know that the visa centers, for example, in the USA are shut at the moment. And we're hoping that they're going to start reopening around about the 13th of July. But again, certain states in the US are doing quite well with the virus, like New York, but other states in, say, the south of the country are not doing well. So it's all a bit up in the air. Whereas if you want to apply for a visa in Wuhan, you can, because the visa center there is open. So it is something that is coming across. Turkey is now open for visas, so you can come from there. Much of Europe is open for visas. Not that you need visas, of course, at the moment, not until the 1st of January. So it's something that you have to keep watching this space about.
Yeah, okay. So I don't think we've got any questions coming in. Is there anything, Tom or James, you'd like to add? Otherwise, we will finish the webinar. As I said, and Tom said at the beginning, we'll be sharing all the video and the slide decks with everybody later on this week. So unless anybody, Tom and James, got anything to add?
No, just thanks everyone for their time this morning.
Yeah, thank you very much. And do get in touch, but we'll be in touch with you with the information. Thanks very much, everybody.